Gail and her daughter Jasmine were just returning from an emotional trip to Jamaica when the following incident took place. Jamaica held a familiar significance for Gail because it was her homeland and where she had shared countless memories with her late husband. However, it was in this return flight that an unknown man took a chance at throwing verbal and physical abuses on her and her daughter. So what should have been a peaceful journey took a dangerous and unexpected turn. But if only this man knew who was sitting beside these women, maybe things wouldn't have ended so badly for him. This trip was a pilgrimage of sorts, a way to honor her husband's memory on the anniversary of his passing. Gail and Jasmine were both looking forward to their connecting flight to Barcelona, which would eventually take them back to their home in London. As Gail, a 77-year-old retiree, settled into her seat, she found herself next to a man named Eric. Eric's annoyance was immediate and obvious as he realized he would be sitting next to not just a lady, but a black woman. His intolerance quickly grew into an attack of racist words. He called Gail all sorts of derogatory names, his voice filled with utter contempt for the woman seated beside him. Jasmine, seeing her mother being verbally assaulted, intervened, trying to shield her from the hateful words. But Eric still continued. He raised his voice at both women, and his threats became more menacing, even suggesting that if both women continued to obstruct him, they would be thrown off the plane. Gail's mind must have raced through a lot of things. How on earth did she get in this mess? Well, Gail's life story is one of misfortune and strength. Born in Jamaica, she grew up in a close community where family and culture provided a strong support system. In the 1960s, she emigrated to the United Kingdom as part of the Windrush generation, seeking better opportunities. Life in Britain, however, was not easy. The Windrush generation faced systemic racism, from employment discrimination to hostility in everyday interactions. However, despite these challenges, Gail built a life for herself. She married, had children, and worked tirelessly to provide for her family. Her husband, who had been her rock, passed away a few years before the incident on the flight. The trip to Jamaica with Jasmine was meant to commemorate his life and the love they shared. Jasmine had always admired her mother's strength and dignity. Growing up, she witnessed the subtle racism that her parents faced, but also saw how they handled it with grace. Jasmine herself had experienced racism, but had always been taught to stand up for herself and others. So, on the flight, Jasmine's protective instincts kicked in. She confronted Eric not only out of anger, but also out of love and respect for her mother. She felt a bit of frustration when the flight crew did not act decisively, and this added to her distress. Jasmine felt a big sense of injustice, not just for her mother, but for all those who had to endure similar experiences. However, as Eric continued to embarrass them, none of them knew that David Lawrence, who was a social media influencer, was seated just a few seats behind. David, also a man of Caribbean descent, had boarded the Ryanair flight from Barcelona to London Stansted Airport and was settling into his seat when he overheard the commotion. He couldn't believe his ears when he heard Eric's outburst. According to him, in an interview after everything, he had heard words like, "I heard this man shouting at this woman saying, 'You're in my way, get out. I don't want you here next to me.'" The blatant racism was shocking, and Lawrence felt compelled to act. He quickly grabbed his phone and began recording the encounter. In the video, Eric's verbal abuse continued without stopping. He threw insults at Gail, calling her sickly, fat, and ugly. And when Jasmine confronted him, defending her mother, he responded with even more hateful words like, "Don't talk to me in a f***ing foreign language, you stupid ugly cow."
Don't talk to me in a you stupid ugly cow.
In raised voices, and still went further to call her horrible names that I can't even mention in this video. Eric's verbal assault on Gail and Jasmine rose to a dangerous level. The tension in the flight cabin was noticeable by everybody because Eric had stood up and loomed over the women with his fists clenched. So it became clear that his anger could turn physical at any moment. Jasmine stood her ground, trying to protect her mother, but fear was visible in her eyes. David Lawrence, who had been recording the incident, quickly assessed the situation. Realizing that immediate action was necessary to prevent harm, he intervened physically. David stood up and moved swiftly toward Eric, positioning himself between the aggressor and the women. His calm but firm voice cut through the tension as he addressed Eric, saying, "Hey, that's enough. You need to sit down and stop this right now." Eric, momentarily taken aback by David's intervention, glared at him, but his reckless behavior seemed to falter. But the influencer stood his ground. Eric, who was unwilling to back down, lunged towards David, and the confrontation turned physical. David managed to deflect Eric's initial attack using both his size and strength. The two men grappled with each other as their struggle became intense and violent. But David's training and physical prowess came into play as he used controlled force to subdue Eric. He fought Eric to the floor, pinning him down with a firm grip. Eric struggled against David's hold, but it quickly became clear that he was no match for David's strength and determination. Pinned to the floor and unable to break free, Eric realized that his strength couldn't match David's. With David's knee pressed firmly against his back, Eric's resistance waned, and he finally stopped struggling. David shouted, maintaining his grip, and said to him, "Enough! You're not hurting anyone else today." Seeing that David had subdued Eric, other passengers and the flight crew rushed to assist. Now more assertive, the flight attendants secured Eric's hands with makeshift restraints to ensure he couldn't cause further trouble. David, breathing heavily but composed, returned to his seat. He continued recording to document the aftermath and ensure a clear record of the incident. However, despite the intervention, something quite unfair still surfaced for Gail. Rather than taking a firm stance against Eric, the flight attendant asked Gail if she would like to move to another seat. This response only added insult to injury. The burden of resolving the situation was placed on the victim, rather than the aggressor. Now visibly distressed, Gail, however, decided to move to a different seat next to her daughter. The emotional toll of the encounter was evident in her appearance. David still recorded, but he was now frustrated because the flight was now prepared for takeoff without repercussions for Eric. The race's passenger was left to enjoy extra legroom in a row by himself, while Gail and Jasmine were left to process the trauma of the encounter. Lawrence, deeply disturbed by what he had witnessed, decided to upload the video to Facebook the following day. He hoped to bring attention to the injustice and hold the airline company accountable for handling the situation. The video quickly went viral, garnering nearly 3 million views and being shared thousands of times. The public outcry was swift and fierce, with many demanding to know why the flight crew had not removed Eric from the plane. Jasmine later shared more about their family's history. Her mother's group of Caribbean immigrants had faced systemic racism and discrimination for decades, and the experience on the plane was a painful reminder of those struggles. David, who also had parents from the Windrush generation, emphasized deeply with Gail. He understood the long history of struggles and quiet endurance that many Caribbean immigrants had developed in the face of racism. After the flight, he spoke with Gail and Jasmine, finding them both disappointed and disgusted by the lack of action taken against Eric. According to him, the racism they suffered on a daily basis is historic. Our parents have learned over the years. Because they've never received any kind of justice, they've just learned to live with it. They kind of have this attitude like, well, what can we do, sort of thing. Gail and Jasmine's ordeal did not end with the flight. The viral video caused a worldwide conversation about racism and the responsibilities of airlines to protect their passengers. Amidst the outpouring of support, there were also questions about what steps could be taken to ensure justice for Gail and prevent such incidents in the future. Support and solidarity rights organizations, legal advisors, and community groups offered support to Gail and Jasmine. Legal experts began examining potential avenues for holding Eric and the airline accountable. Activists organized campaigns and petitions demanding that the airline improve its policies and training to better handle similar situations. The viral video stirred a global conversation about racism and corporate responsibility. People from all over the world expressed their horror and anger at how the situation was handled. Many demanded that the airline take more decisive action against Eric and implement better policies to protect passengers from such behavior. Many saw the airline's initial response as insufficient. The company stated that it had reported the incident to the police and restated its commitment to not tolerating disruptive behavior. However, for the public, this was not enough. They wanted to see concrete actions, such as banning Eric from future flights and ensuring that flight crews were better trained to handle similar situations. Under immense public pressure, the airline issued further statements condemning Eric's behavior and restating their commitment to passenger safety and dignity. The airline said they were reviewing their training programs for staff to equip them better to handle such incidents. They also pledged 1 year of free flight tickets to Gail and her daughter Jasmine. This would ensure that the women can travel to any destination of choice, as far as it is en route to the airline's destination. This was seen as nothing other than a faulty damage control procedure, and it did very little to restore people's confidence in the airline operatives. For Gail, the journey to healing was slow and challenging. The emotional scars from the incident on the flight went deep. However, the overwhelming support from the community and the actions being taken towards justice provided some solace. Jasmine, ever the pillar of strength, continued to advocate for her mother, ensuring that her voice was heard and that they would not be silenced. David became an unexpected advocate through his actions. His decision to record and share the incident with the world brought crucial attention to Gail's plight. Lawrence continued to use his platform to speak out against racism, sharing stories and supporting initiatives to foster inclusion and equality. The incident, while very traumatic, also shows the importance of standing up against injustice and the power of collective action. For Gail and Jasmine, the hope was that their painful experience would lead to meaningful changes in airline policies and major societal attitudes toward racism. As they continued to live, they did so with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that their story had not just been heard, but also led to a meaningful dialogue and could help pave the way for a more just and respectful future. As the video of the incident went viral, with the footage clearly showing Eric's face, soon the internet was abuzz with efforts to identify him. Within days, internet detectives uncovered his identity and shared it widely on social media. The pressure mounted as people called for him to face consequences for his actions. Once identified, Eric faced major personal and professional consequences. His name and image were circulated everywhere, leading to public shaming. It was reported that he faced the consequences at work. Many companies have strict policies against racist behavior, and being publicly associated with such actions can lead to disciplinary measures or even termination. Following the incident, Essex police launched a formal investigation. They gathered evidence, including the video filmed by the influencer, which documented Eric's racist behavior. Witness statements from other passengers and the flight crew were also collected to build a comprehensive case. Based on the evidence, Eric was charged with public order offenses, specifically for causing harassment, alarm, or distress with racial aggravation. These charges are serious and show the severity of his actions, which were not only disruptive but also very harmful due to their racist nature. He appeared in court multiple times as the case progressed. During these appearances, the prosecution presented the video evidence and witness testimonies, which painted a clear picture of the incident. The defense, meanwhile, attempted to downplay the charges, arguing various points about his state of mind and intentions. After several months of legal proceedings, the court reached a verdict. Eric was found guilty of the charges against him. The judge, in delivering the verdict, emphasized the unacceptable nature of his behavior and the serious impact it had on Gail and Jasmine. Eric was sentenced to a combination of community service and mandatory attendance at a rehabilitation program focused on addressing and correcting racist attitudes. Additionally, he was fired and ordered to pay compensation to Gail and Jasmine for the distress and harm he caused to both women. The sentencing aimed not only to punish Eric, but also to rehabilitate him and prevent similar behavior in the future. The outcome of the case was seen as a victory for those advocating against racism. It proved that the legal system could and would take decisive action against individuals who engage in such harmful behavior. For Gail and Jasmine, while the legal outcome could not erase the trauma they experienced, it provided a sense of justice and closure. In the months that followed, Eric became distraught. He had run out of savings due to the heavy fine imposed on him. He had been laid off from the firm, and he was neck-deep in debt from the survival loans he had secured. He was also banned from taking public flights for a period of time and could not secure another job due to the negative implications of his actions. A man who once lived without a care now had a lot of things to worry about. This sorry fate can befall anyone who subjects another person to racial ridicule and shame. I hope this story has been insightful so far. What do you make of Eric's story? If you were David, would you have uploaded the video? Kindly let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.